How could God be wrong to tell men to join the song? All creation sang, the spheres of the heavens rang, the serpent plagues were sown. Adam said our voice off tone. In the beginning, God made us good to the praise of His glorious grace. Within creation, song Adam stood to lead the choir of His race. How could God be wrong to tell men to join the song? All creation sang, the spheres of the heavens rang, serpent plagues were sown. Adam said our voice off tone. As the devil sang his serpent song, he asked our mother to sing his tune. Blagging that learning may take too long, but he knows a way should be good by noon. How could God be wrong to tell men to join the song? All creation sang, the spheres of the heavens rang, serpent plagues were sown. Adam said our voice off tone.
Good day to you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening from. My name is Zachary Kameen, the Curious Christian, and we are going to be going into another day, another Celtic mythology deal, Celtic paganism, and the main purpose of these is uh, to see what exactly, I guess, the hype is all about when it comes to paganism. Uh, I strongly believe that if I were to leave Christianity, it's not likely, but it's not going to be for atheism again. It won't be for Islam. It won't be for any sort of Unitarianism. I'd be leaning more towards uh, diversity rather than unity uh, or just nihilism altogether. So, what better direction than to go the pagan direction if that were the case? And best way to figure that out for myself is to go to sources, and by sources, the kindness of the 21st century is that there is a lot of technology that allows for uh, being able to hear from others first. Uh, Much of paganism, in a sense, is oral tradition, listening to those around you, talking to one another. And so, therefore, uh, it's not as simple as reading a primary source, especially with Celtic paganism, where from from the last lives I did, from the videos that I was listening to, they were uh, making it very clear that uh, too much, if not most of, or if not all of Celtic paganism is oral tradition stuff that did get lost, except for Celtic Christians, so the uh, descendants of Celtic pagans who became Christians, seeking to, in my understanding, my view, is that they were seeking to honor their pagan fathers and mothers by keeping or creating a record of what it was that they did and believed. Then you also have rival pagans in the character of Julius Caesar, a very pagan man who sought to show that his gods were the strong gods and the Celtic gods were the weak gods. Uh, and so if I had to lean towards who is probably giving the best light of Celtic, it would probably be uh, the Celtic Christians who are seeking to love and honor their parents in such a way as to show what they believe without uh, stepping on too many toes. So we're going to get into a video that I have not watched. I haven't watched any of these videos that I've been doing because I wanted to be able to react to them in the fly. I do keep a uh, noted list of what it is. Uh, I am paying attention. Uh, so let me show from last video. I have here, let me make it bigger. So I was keeping notes on what is true, good, and beautiful about these things, dealing with the uh, video that I watched last time from Wisdom of Odin. We're not watching that this time. We're watching a video by Irish Myth, who is dealing with the differences between Celtic and Irish paganism, which is fine since uh, I am both Irish and Celtic, and so being able to see how these two warring tribes, groups of tribes, uh, did indeed recognize the enmity of the gods, and so therefore the enmity between each other. Uh, the the last video from Wisdom of Odin, he was trying to find a way of like making them be friends and ignoring the enmity. From like literally the first few seconds of this video we're gonna watch today, he jumps right into saying that you can't merge them. Well, he just says no, they're not the same. And so it's the quick answer, and then there's a longer video that gives the longer answer. So we will get into uh, this video. We're going to start it now, at least. So let me pull that down. All right, bam. Irish mythology, Celtic mythology. I do not have a YouTube premium because I am too cheap at the moment. Uh, but I will get a YouTube premium at some point, and then we won't have to see ads. I will be as quick as possible to uh, mute and pause silly ads. I've noticed that it probably is just faster to let them play out and then skip them as they go, but it's fine. I usually use those as pretty good breakpoints to be able to make commentary also. So let's get started.
While you often hear the two terms used interchangeably, are Irish mythology and Celtic mythology the same thing? The short answer, no, they're different. The longer answer, while they're not
So right off the rip, he makes very clear, no, they're not the same. And I appreciate the very quickness, and it was something that uh, I didn't get from Wisdom of Odin, so I do enjoy that there is a guy who's going in another direction, not other direction, but taking a different approach when it comes to these. Because as you could probably hear from it, Wisdom of Odin talking about Celtic paganism, uh, obviously he's chosen a side.
synonyms, Irish mythology and Celtic mythology are connected. There are two ways we can think about this, and that's because there are two ways one can interpret the meaning of Celtic mythology. Now, if the first thing that pops into your head when you think of Celtic mythology is a dude with gigantic antlers sprouting out of his skull, then you're effectively interpreting Celtic mythology to mean Gaulish mythology.
Which I had no idea about this guy because I am a sad, sad individual. I don't even think that in high school, if they talked about it, I paid attention. Uh, and if I'm being honest, I don't think they ever talked about Celtic paganism. I think they were too busy associating the West with Christianity and showing that the West was a savage group, and so therefore Christianity is a savage religion, and they didn't associate any paganism with the negative behaviors of my Celtic and Irish ancestors, and Gallic, if we want to even throw that in there. But that is interesting to me that uh, he's quickly distinguishing himself on this. Like I said, I appreciate it. 30 seconds in, we're doing great.
Ancient Gaul, which consisted of modern-day France, Belgium, northern Italy, western Switzerland, and parts of the Netherlands and Germany, was the home turf of the Gaulish or Gallic-speaking Celts. That dude with the antlers who's often depicted wearing a torque and sitting cross-legged, he's the ancient Celtic/Gallo-Roman nature god Cernunnos. And while there are dozens of depictions of Cernunnos spread across Europe, the overwhelming majority of them appear in northeastern Gaul. Indeed, there is a whole pantheon of deities centered in Gaul, including Tyrannus, god of thunder, who's been called the Gaulish.
All right, so uh, obviously super interesting, and this is part of the reason why in the was it in Christian Celtics they associated the devil with that dude. I assume the same reason why Greek-speaking Christians then start associating Zeus with the devil, and Hebrew Christians associated Belial uh, and Dagon with the devil, because those were the strong gods, and they recognize them to be false gods, idols, and so they assume strongest god or strongest false god, probably powered um, by uh, the strongest demon. It's maybe a quick, but you can see where uh, Christians are doing a quick one-to-one. May not like it, but he's even pointing out that a lot of pagans will lump up Gaulish with Celtics and whatnot, and or Gaulish Celts with English Celts, and that'd be like associating or lumping in Englishmen with Germans. It sounds to me what his attitude towards this is going in. So no lumping, and don't get mad at Christians for lumping uh, gods with demons when uh, pagans are really good at lumping each other. Modern day pagans, ecumenical pagans, as it were, ones who are seeking to have the Christian unity with the pagan diversity.
Jupiter, Tutatis, tribal protector god aka the Gaulish Mars, Ogmios, god of eloquence/club-wielding hero who's been described as an older version of Hercules, Lugus, the many-skilled god who's been called the Gaulish Mercury, Belenus, who may or may not be a sun god but regardless he's been called the Gaulish Apollo, Gobanus, the smithing god comparable to Vulcan, Succulus, god of agriculture and prosperity who's been called the Gaulish Dispater, and Epona, the horse goddess and possible leader of souls aka Psychopomp, whose cult became so popular that between the 1st and 3rd century CE, she was worshipped not only across the Roman Empire, but in Rome itself. Now,
All right, so there you go. Little, ooh, I paused that real good. So even here, you see this is a very common, in fact, Roman practice of trying to associate uh, a native god with the imperial god, and he's doing kind of the same thing. But then he's like, "This is cool." Epona just gets put in because I assume uh, they didn't have a god. They probably liked how Epona sounded. Even with Lugus, and these seemed like Romanized. Uh, they seem like Romanized names because uh, of the ending with the S's, which show masculinity. But let's keep moving.
It is absolutely valid to refer to the aforementioned gods as Celtic gods, and by extension, it's valid to refer to stories about said gods as Celtic mythology. The ancient Gauls were Celtic speakers after all. What's more, for much of antiquity, the Gauls were the Celts, at least according to their Greco-Roman neighbors. As archaeologist Barry Cunliffe notes in his book Druids: A Very Short Introduction, in classical texts, the names Gauls and Celts were often used interchangeably. Granted, the
So he brings up a decent point that uh, Celtic was kind of the language. I'd have to read more into that. A nice map, as it were. I assume it's a more modern map, judging by the coastline deal, the cartography of the coastline. Uh, but I mean, I'm sure, and again, I'm sure there's bleeding into this. Nevertheless, very interesting, and we'll keep going.
The ancient Gauls didn't really write much down, which was due in large part to a Druid-enforced taboo on writing down sacred knowledge, so most of the information we have concerning the mythical exploits and interminglings of Gaulish deities, like the horned god Cernunnos and the horse goddess Epona, and the agricultural god Succulus, from whom the Gauls believed all Gauls were descended, will that factoid be relevant in a few seconds? Maybe. Comes from
So, right there, you got, I think he said succulus, which is that where all all the things come. Uh, which is, fair enough. Uh, I do enjoy that in Athens they were wise enough to put in an unknown god that they worshiped. And let's be fair, because Celtics never wrote stuff down, you have these images without uh, any full knowledge of what their views on with them. And so it can be, I don't want to say kind of touchy, but you don't know what you don't know. And we're running on very limited knowledge here, and so we can't be too grandiose in our claims.
surviving inscriptions and descriptions given by classical writers and conquerors,
So,
like Julius
Julius
Caesar.
Caesar.
Source material aside, when we take this view of Celtic mythology with its focus on the Gaulish pantheon, it's easy to see what makes it different from Irish mythology. Irish mythology is from Ireland. Its stories are set, for the most part, in and around Ireland, and it has its own pantheon of Irish deities separate from the Gaulish ones, known as the Tuatha Dé Danann. Members of the Tuatha Dé Danann include Ogma, the god of language and eloquence, Lu,
Right, so this is getting important. Uh, I have a song in part that deals with Luke, so I appreciate uh, that right away.
the god of many talents, Vila, god of death, Govnu, the smith god, the Deda, the father of the Irish gods from whom all the gods were descended, the Morgan, triple goddess and goddess of battle, Menanin MacLear, the sea god, and Nuada Ergetlam, the silver-handed leader of the Tuatha Dé Danann. You know, deities that are distinctly Irish with no, wait, what's happening? What's going on with that chart?
Yep, that's exactly right. It's uh, again, uh, the reason why it's there is a kind of merge, as it were, is that the gods here, if you want to deal with that, are I think I referred to it in a short as uh, it's not so much. Yes, the mythologies, the characters in their mythologies are separate beings. But it would, because the whole point or the main point is that they're worshiping nature, a nature that is chaotic, has its seasons, has its issues. It's not issues. Issues is the wrong word. But it goes in cycles. It has its seasons. It has its warmer and colder weathers. Uh, some very violent, torrential uh, thunder battles, as put in Percy Jackson's The Hobbit. You've got some pretty nasty climactical dealings with man and the world around them. You've got people who are just snapping, and we are made in God's image, and so when you see human behavior, you got lunatics, people who are affected by the moon in a negative way. Uh, it will cause you to seek answers, and so I would say that's the storytelling of mythology is what they're doing is they're trying to understand who God is or explain to their children and to each other who God is via these stories. And uh, the standard pagan view is that uh, there is multiple gods, or put more appropriately, that there is one God with a split personality disorder. Uh, and so, therefore, what you're trying to do is find a way to either A, uh, figure out who in what season is the strongest god or in what terrain is the strongest god. And so then serve and worship and imitate that god accordingly, uh, imitating them in your dealings with other image bearers of that god, and also imitating them in how they interact with other gods. You would then interact with the uh, worshippers of those other gods because you are imitating uh, Lug, and then another person is imitating uh, is it Belinus or Belly or is it Goibnu or Gabanus? I'm totally mispronouncing those. It's fine. I can't even pronounce Yeshua. Right? I'm always saying Jesus. So I'm not salty about name calling. Uh, but uh, go, because we worship through our fingertips, so what we worship, who we worship, always starts to affect our what we actually do, both in relation to God or the gods, and then it always overflows into how we deal with uh, one another, other image bearers of God or the gods. And again, uh, you can find some very peaceful people who are worshiping peaceful a peaceful God, but then the question quickly becomes, well, you may be worshiping a peaceful God, uh, such as Bridget, but is she uh, a strong God? When the times are tough and you need strength, is it her that you should be uh, imitating, serving, uh, or do you want more of a uh, Pautidus or uh, Goibnu? What is it that you're wanting? Uh, And so that is going to heavily affect what you're worshiping, what you are doing.
Oh, right. You see, some of the Irish gods have possible parallels or cognates with the aforementioned Celtic gods, which makes sense given that the mythology of Ireland, or at least the version we inherited, was created by, or at least very heavily influenced by, the Celts. Different Celts, these were Gaelic or Goidelic-speaking Celts, not Gaulish-speaking Celts, but Celts nonetheless. And when their Celtic language and culture arrived in Ireland, likely during the Iron Age, new meanings were attached to the dolmens and tumuli that had adorned the Irish landscape landscape since the Stone Age. These megaliths became the homes of the gods and portals to the other world. That's essentially how Irish mythology was born, and that leads us to the second way one can think about Celtic mythology. Because if Irish mythology is also an ancient Celtic storytelling tradition concerning the activities of divine beings,
Right there. And I didn't even know he was going to say that, but right there, the doings of the divine beings. Also, good point is that uh, they were trying to again make sense of the world around them, or the effects or the results of a chaotic world. They see these megaliths, these tombs, and these giant uh, whole stone structures, but nobody there, like not a soul, not even a bone. And so they're trying to make sense of what's going on here. What's the deal? Uh, are we what are we walking into?
which it is, then one could easily make the argument that Irish mythology is a form of or subcategory of Celtic mythology. And I, for one, wouldn't argue with that. In fact, I'll gladly make the argument for that.
All right. Ooh, I paused that so good. All right. So
Mythology, the ultimate umbrella term.
stop. All right. Let me back it up a little bit. So he makes a solid point uh, that there's these tribes are talking. These tribes are probably connected ancestrally. So the Celtics come before the Irish, considering the idea of a westward dispersion. So starting from the east, working your way west. So the likelihood of somebody coming from Celtic Gaul, making a ship, crossing the channels, obviously not channels as in like what we make, uh, but making ways to get across the seas. But getting across those rocky terrains to get to a much larger landmass, we're there, and now you've got the English Celtic or the English and Scottish Celtics. And then a little bit later, and by a little bit, hundreds, thousands of years, who knows? God only knows. And they hop a boat. They assumedly uh, are either A, the same people who hopped onto that island, keep going west and they land on there, or maybe descendants of the first discoverers of one hopping onto there. It can be a mixture because we don't know the distance of time where from Gaul get to England slash Scotland and then getting to Ireland. The assumption to me will be something to the effect of very quickly. Uh, I wouldn't even be surprised that the people who land on, like the group that landed on uh, England was a huge or a larger fleet, if we want to use that more modern language. And storms happen on there all the time. Somebody could have easily Odyssey style got off course and landed on Ireland and then never seen the other people ever again. And then you've got uh and so then they work up Ireland, other people work up London. The people in Ireland somehow don't survive and uh the people of England who finally do cross from England to Ireland see the structures that the ancestors of the people who first landed on England had made. Uh, we don't know. I'm I'm making just as many guesses as possible in a way that honors my Celtic ancestors and Irish ancestors.
And argue with that. In fact, I'll gladly make the argument for that. Celtic mythology, the ultimate umbrella term. At the end of the day, or the Iron Age as it were, Irish mythology can be considered a branch of Celtic mythology similar to how Catholicism is a branch of the broader religious tradition of Christianity. No, that's not a perfect analogy, but the takeaway is that Celtic mythology can be used as an umbrella term to refer to all of the mythologies of the different Celtic tribes. So in addition to the Gaulish-speaking Celts who lived in Gaul and the Gaelic-speaking Celts who settled in Ireland, Scotland, and the Isle of Man, you've got the Brittonic-speaking Celts who settled in Wales, Cornwall, and Brittany, the Boy who lived in what is now northern Italy and Austria and Hungary and the Czech Republic, the Celtiberians who lived in what is now central Spain, the Galaici in Portugal and Galicia and western Asturias, the Galatians in Turkey, and the Lepanti up in the Alps. Yes, all of those tribes spoke Celtic languages, languages that originated with a common Proto-Celtic progenitor. And language, of course, is elemental to what it means to be Celtic.
So it would possibly be a better fit that you would say something to the effect of, you said uh, Christianity, and then you break down. It might be better to say uh, Semitic or Abrahamic. So you've got the Abrahamic religions, or Hebraic religion. So you've got, uh, is it the uh, just not Judaism per se, but you have Islam, Judaism, if we want to play that, but uh, and then you have a bunch of the uh, factions that you deal with when you deal with what are they doing? Worshiping a you know cow god in the desert. The assumption to me will be, well, that was probably a what they considered a legitimate form of worship for their people and language tongue. Uh, there didn't seem in their mind any disassociation. You see, I think it's Rebecca who, uh, in Genesis, is hiding one of her father's household gods, and he's willing to like go to war over the stealing of them. So there's something going on there. Uh, and then you branch out where you deal with Christianity, which is a sect or a branch of Judaism. We'll just use that, even though Judaism is simply referring to uh, the tribe of Judah because that's the tribe that had the kingship dealing with. So King David was a Judean, uh, and so we're dealing with uh, that branch, as it were. But you still have the Sumerians to the north of the rest of the tribes of Israel, and you know it's obviously complicated, like the Celtic. But even with that, you've got Talmudic Jews, you've got Messianic Jews, you have uh, the uh, Hebrew-speaking Muslims, you have Hebrew-speaking Christians, Messianic Jews, back to it. But so you've got uh, those branches, probably closer to uh, what you're driving at. You've got Baal worshipping Jews, obviously, because you've got the Baals, which are just, and then you've got the Shiras, you've got uh, Dagon going on, and it's probably, I assume, something akin to that, where there's a proto language, Hebrew, and the different cultures, where you've got Hebrew proper, you have Aramaic, Syriac, uh, and then Arabic comes from I think is a branch sister or branch daughter of Syriac, if I'm not mistaken. And so you're dealing with a very complicated language type that gets associated with different gods. You read in Second Kings, especially, you see just how intertwined uh, worship of other deities literally get uh, put into the same temple as Yahweh. And then, yeah, and then Christianity is a branch off that, that we would say a fulfillment of that system. And uh, all of a sudden, it starts to, it being Christianity in general, starts saving pagans. And when you start saving pagans, it was kind of simple for these very tribalistic groups to, I don't want to say feel comfortable, but uh, see how they can relate to a very tribalistic religion of Judaism uh, vis-a-vis Christianity, and uh, being able to associate themselves with that. Now, obviously, I would also say that it's the work of the Holy Spirit, the one true God, and they see with the Trinitarian the difference. And this is what I said at the beginning of the video. The idea of the diversity of God is, I would say, ubiquitous, except for Islam itself. It's a ubiquitous principle, and especially tribalistic uh, views. The thing that sets Christianity apart from uh, paganism proper is that the diversity of God is not one caused by enmity, meaning uh, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, as revealed in Scripture, are not at war with each other. They're not in a constant state of flux where they're making alliances where the Father and the Son go to war with the Holy Spirit, and then after a while they get tired of that, and then the Holy Spirit and the Son go to war with the Father, and then the Holy Spirit and the Father go to war with the Son, and you just got this infighting, alliances, uh, dirty deeds, dirty deals, uh, bad behavior, sins between each other that then we get to imitate. Uh, you don't have that with Christianity. So that is uh, as far as the diversity goes, uh, what uh, we're dealing with that Godhead. That's why also I mentioned that paganism can also be associated where it's not that there is multiple gods, it's that uh, it is a Godhead. It is one God with a multiple personalities that are at war within the one God. Uh, and this gets associated with just nature in general, where winter and spring often violently transition from each other. This is where you're seeing tornadoes happen a lot. You have summer violently uh, in a state of enmity with fall, where you get a bunch of hurricanes. Hurricane season is associated with this, where you just in a terrible, tumultuous, warlike fervor between these seasons of nature. But it's one nature, but in a constant state of disorder, is how it seems. Uh, the Godhead of Christianity, it's one God in three persons, who are not at enmity with one another.
Remember, the Celts were not a continuous lineage of people, meaning, for example, that the Gaelic speakers who settled in Ireland were not genetic descendants of the original Proto-Celtic peoples who likely emerged in Central Europe in the Late Bronze Age. Celtic isn't a race or ethnicity, it's a culture, and we can map the spread of that culture both through language and mythology. The Gauls, the Gaels, the Britons, the Boii, the Celtiberians, the Galaci, the Galatians, the Lepanti, they all practiced some form of what scholars call the ancient Celtic religion, more commonly known as Celtic paganism. And while in the majority of cases,
And this is not just like modern day historians. This is something, again, that was recognized by uh, people in those ancient days by those cultures. Galatians recognized uh, a commonality with the Gauls. So the east side of the Roman Empire, Galatians, recognized a kinship with the west side of the Roman Empire, Gauls. Uh, and they recognized a kinship with the boys. Like they themselves recognized the cultural kinship. It wasn't a association that was thrusted upon them. It was a uh, association that they were pleased to claim to themselves. And this is probably why Christianity in the West stayed so strong is and didn't get beat back by uh, Islam is uh, they were quick to have a kin relationship with each other. So when uh, the Gauls of Spain got overrun by the Muslim Moors, uh, there was a sense of filial duty by the northern Celtic Christians to do something about it. They didn't just uh, stay in a state of anxious concern for their southern clansmen, but they genuinely sought the relief. Now, I'm curious and wondering why, maybe at some point I'll run into it, why it was that when the eastern relations in modern day Turkey area got taken over by the uh, Muslims on that side, uh, why it wasn't uh, driven, why there wasn't a seeking relief. Now, I mean, I guess technically because you can see in the Crusades there was a long-standing desire to uh, push that, and maybe we could even say uh, that the Crusades were less a Christian versus Muslim uh, war, and maybe more of a Celtic versus uh, Turkish war, or uh, Persian war, or Arabic war. So it was, yeah, the Celtic versus the Arabic, Celts versus the Arabs. And so it's these two large uh, family models, cultural schemes, who are uh, clashing is probably too strong of a word, but certainly uh, when the southern in Spain were taken, uh, there was a violent reaction to it. When the East Eastern Celts were in trouble, there was a violent reaction in the Crusades, and so we in our modern day times shouldn't be so uh, swooning and so sad or frustrated or bewildered by uh, the idea that Celtic men would seek to defend other Celtic men. And they weren't as uh, desirous to save North Africa because uh, as or they didn't have such a violent reaction to the North African Christians being overrun by the invaders, as it were. When they stepped on Celtic territory, Celtic Christians did respond exceptionally strong. So, just a thought.
Don't worry, we'll get to the exceptions. There are no surviving written accounts of the Celtic mythologies, plural, associated with these religions. We can still glean their existence from archaeological evidence. And we can speculate based on what we find in the manuscripts that have survived, specifically those associated with the Irish and Welsh traditions. Indeed, when we look at Irish mythology and Welsh mythology side by side, we find many similarities between their characters and narratives, despite the fact that one came from a Gaelic Celtic tradition and the other from a Brittonic Celtic tradition. For example, the famed Irish hero Finn McCool has a parallel in the Welsh hero Gwyn ap Nudd. In Old Irish, Finn meant white or fair, while in Old Welsh, Gwyn meant the same thing, white or fair. Same word, different Celtic language. This pattern continues with the Irish sea god Mennan Maclear, Maclear meaning son of the sea, who has a watery Welsh doppelganger in Monadon Fab Lear. Then there's the leader of the Irish gods, Nuada Ergetlam, Nuada of the silver arm or hand, who has a parallel in the Welsh character Nudla Errant, Nud of the silver arm or hand, who in the myths ruled all of Britain. It's likely that Nuada and Nud, later called Lud, were both derived from an earlier Celtic god Nodens, who was worshipped in pre-Roman Britain. And I'd be remiss not to mention that a one Mr. J.R.R. Tolkien once visited the ruins of a temple to Nodens located at Dwarf's Hill, a site known for its network of tunnels and iron deposits and inscriptions that talk about a cursed ring.
Yeah. So, he's making great points, and we're going to keep him going. Though we should, I don't want to say we need to be concerned, but when we're dealing with uh, these tribal, uh, is it dealing with these tribal, how do I want to word it? Associations? No, that's not the right word. When we're dealing with trying to compare each of them, you have to remember the thing that they have in relation with each other is that they have the same kind of nature. They have the same kind of weather, same kind of seasons, and they are a people that like to write stories uh, to not just make sense. They're not philosophers, they're poets. Uh, they're making poetry that go with the wind. So they're seeking to imitate the wind. So they're making poems that go at the beat of the drum of a woodpecker. They're seeking to uh, make poetry that not just makes sense of the fallen tree, but also make poetry that sounds like a fallen tree. And they're because they have those associations, you are dealing with similar outcomes of mythology and names. Well, the names part probably just has to do with a common ancestral tongue. But beyond that, they again are dealing with the same kind of climate, same kind of storms, and same kind of pleasant seasons and calamities and pleasantries and luxuries and necessities and famines and whatnot. Uh, and all those uh, commonalities of a certain group that enjoys making stories uh, is going to bring about a similar form of worship. And also, the idea of market day probably helps. So you've got these bards, you've got these guys who are making these stories for their families, assumedly. Like I make stories for my daughters and writing a bunch of songs for them to make sense of the world around them. And when I play it for other people, that relates to each other. You've got troubadours, you've got these wandering bards who may not have families, but they're seen as good enough to not just stay in their market day village, but they travel to another village for their market day. And that's probably also uh, where the associations of these similar gods come in. Bart it could be just as simple as these musicians, uh, yeah, these musicians, these bards, these playwrights, these music makers that really like the sound of the name when it gets associated with this form of weather. Uh, it could be as simple as that, it just sounds cool. And that should be fine. And I would say, if that is the case, we shouldn't be opposed to when we're telling stories about things to change the name to something that sounds cool as well in our day.
You can't make this up. Well, I mean, you can. You know what I mean. As far as I can tell, it was Tolkien who first drew the connection between Nodens and the Irish Nuada of the Silver Hand, who in turn inspired Tolkien's character Celebrimbor, the Elven Smith, whose name means, you guessed it, Silver Hand. Anyway, the point I was trying to make before I went off down this hobbit hole is that there is clearly some connective tissue between Welsh and Irish and Gaulish mythologies. Back to the chart. The Welsh Ufid Fabdon, the Irish Ogma, the Gaulish Ogmios, possible cognates. The Welsh Lu, the Irish Lug, the Gaulish Lugus, possible cognates. The Welsh Belimar, the Irish Bila, the Gaulish Belinus, possible cognates. The Welsh Gofanon, the Irish Govnu, the Gaulish Gobanus, possible cognates. The Welsh Rhiannon, the Irish Morgan, the Gaulish Epona, possible cognates. Now, originally I envisioned the
Right. And so this will be very important. I assume he's going to be talking about how these different names don't necessarily associate with the same powers, same kind of things that those name associated gods, uh, like the name associated gods aren't doing the same thing in each one of their myths. Again, it could be as simple as uh, the uh, poetry structure during their bonfires, during their worship ceremonies, during their market day celebrations, during their feast days, during their family gatherings, whatever. Uh, the name in their tribal tongue may work better as associated with uh, this other form of storytelling, and it can be as simple as that. And by simple, I mean it's complicated because complicated as in, uh, you know, if you're playing the game of the wind blew from the mouth of Lug, playing that game, and then another person will says, well, we like to rhyme not with the vowels but with the consonants, and so we can't play that game, and so we're going to do it like this, and then uh, this is where uh, the uh, uh, name associations aren't so pleasant, pleasantly uh, simple as historians would probably prefer. But poets don't mind at all. I mean, me as a poet, I don't mind.
Gauls as sort of being the founders of Celtic mythology who then passed the torch onto the Irish and Welsh. However, when we look at how the different Celtic languages actually evolved, branching off from Proto-Celtic, regardless of whether you go with the P/Q Celtic classification system or the Insular/Continental classification system, the end result is the same. Like the Irish language itself, which evolved independently of the Gaulish language, Irish mythology likely evolved independently of Gaulish mythology. And this points to the likelihood that there was once a common Celtic mythology or Proto-Celtic mythology that went hand in hand or word for word with
Mythologies are often not written by priests. And so, uh, I mean, with my view, and I can be wrong, uh, the uh, there's not an independent or a branch off. These are uh, mythologies are not made from temple to temple. They are made from bonfire to bonfire. They are not made by uh, kings. They're more made by jesters. They're not made by uh, the big kahuna. They're usually made by the bard. They're made by uh, the man with the lyre, not uh, the lion man. We should point out, like you've got Canterbury Tales is written by Chaucer, who spends a lot of his younger years in the Gaulish countries, where he picks up certain stories and then translates them to English and then puts his own English spin on it. You see this exact same idea when it comes to Shakespeare's renditions of Julius Caesar, of Macbeth, of Much Ado About Nothing. Uh, the The Merchant of Venice. These are continental stories. Some of them are inspired by, and then they have a Celtic or an English spin to them, and or a British spin to them. And then on the flip side, you'll see the same idea in the Gaulish country when it comes to uh, the uh, English myths or the English spin-offs, and then they have an echo chamber effect. You see the same idea with Americans making movies. You see this with Hercules, the Disney movie Hercules, where uh, you know there was a silly uproar about, oh, I think it was like he had red hair and blue eyes or something like that. But then you talk to Greeks and they're like, the only thing we had a problem with is that Hades was the bad guy in the story instead of Hera. Because in the original Herculean stories, Hera, the goddess, his mother, not mother, uh, was the bad guy, or the bad gal, and they had an issue with making Hera a passive spectator of the whole thing, and Hades being the antagonist. So you see that. And again, same story with an American twist, American spin.
With the Proto-Celtic language. To quote historian Peter Beresford Ellis's A Dictionary of Irish Mythology, the fact that one can see relationships and counterparts demonstrates that Irish mythology is not a separate entity from the rest of the Celtic world. In it we find echoes of a common Celtic mythological, religious, and perhaps historical experience. Irish mythology, the best preserved form of Celtic mythology.
Uh, I do enjoy pausing, as you can tell. The Another thing is somebody may say, well, you can't prove that bards uh, talk to each other cross channel, cross water, uh, and so your theory kind of goes out the window. Uh, I would uh, hazard a uh, a warning to that view of there is no proof of interconnection or conversations between them. I would say there are plenty of storytellers who are willing to risk their lives to cross a water and then come back just because it may make a good story. And it may be as simple as that. They think it would be cool and maybe get a story out, see some of those sea creatures that other bards talked about. And uh we shouldn't take away the idea of bragging rights and just general Celtic curiosity
Historians
and a desire to honor your father and mother. If they know that they came from another land, then they may desire to return to that land and then come back after seeking to honor in a certain way. Hearing stories about a larger ruin or a larger temple or a larger whatever may also cause pilgrimages. And some of those pilgrims are also bards and playwrights and troubadours and things. Uh, we see this with Canterbury Tales, where all of the people in the story are storytellers. It's not just a professional storyteller like a Chalmers or a Chaucer, but all of them, he's showing that all of them tell stories from the merchant and the miller to the Lady of Bath and the knight. Like not one of them is left out in their creativity, going from one city to Canterbury.
Thomas Cahill famously argued that following the collapse of the Roman Empire, the Irish effectively saved Western civilization by copying and preserving important texts. Imagine an Irish monk up in his stone tower surrounded by ink and vellum. He's pulled up his ladder to prevent Viking marauders from getting inside. It's probably no exaggeration to say that actions such as these helped preserve Irish mythology for future generations. Now, did the Christian scribes who recorded the Irish myths we know and love today take a few liberties here and there? Of course they did. The Christian influence is readily apparent in the texts. Just take a look at the Leber Gabála Érenn, or the Book of the Taking of Ireland, often referred to as the Book of Invasions. Dated to the 11th century, the book details the arrivals of the different mythical races of Ireland and concludes with the Milesians, Celtic speakers from Spain, displacing the Irish gods, the Tuatha Dé Danann, and sending them underground. But interestingly, the Leber Gabála Érenn tells us that Ireland's very first wave of settlers is led by Noah's granddaughter, Cessair, who also lends that group their name, the Cessair. And yes, by Noah, I mean Old Testament Noah with the flood and the ark and the animals. In other texts, it's shown that the hero Finn McCool's lineage can be traced back to Mil Hispania, king of Spain, namesake of the Milesians, and back to Queen Scoda of Egypt, namesake of Scotland, and all the way back to Adam and Eve. Later, Finn's son Oisin, Ireland's greatest poet who disappeared to Tir na Nog, the land of youth or the land of promise, for 300 years, can be found rubbing elbows with none other than St. Patrick. So yeah, while Christian monks did much to preserve Irish mythology, it's obvious that what they handed down to us isn't the purest form of this Celtic storytelling tradition.
Valid point. Uh, should not be ashamed of the fact that Celtic Christians are finding a way to honor their fathers and mothers and to try to fill in the gaps of the history. And let's be honest, again, uh, they're just continuing the tradition of telling good stories to make sense of what's going on. They're not calling the characters of their stories gods anymore. They're telling the stories as these great men and women of the past, their fathers and mothers, are not willing to put them in the first commandment place of worshiping them, but they are willing to honor them as fathers and mothers of their tribes.
As with other Celtic peoples, it seems the Gaels in Ireland, and specifically their Druid class, had a taboo against writing down sacred knowledge. Thus, their religious stories were only shared orally prior to the arrival of Christianity. To quote Celtic scholar Georges Dautin, it is probable that the most ancient pieces of the epic literature of Ireland were written before the middle of the 7th century. But how long previously they had been preserved by oral tradition, this is a point that is difficult to estimate. The 4 cycles of Irish mythology.
Yep. So this is important because, and we can grant that the uh, Christians are people of the book. We enjoy writing stuff down. We believe that the Lord Jesus is the Word uh, become flesh, and so we are very good at putting ink to paper so as to uh, honor our father and mother and also worship the Lord in a way that pleases Him. And the best way that they do it is not just simply by uh, singing the words, and they weren't afraid of uh, writing runes down or writing symbols down, as perhaps the Druids were, uh, but they had a more tangible honoring of their ancestors.
Today, scholars organize Irish mythology into 4 distinct chronological phases or cycles: the mythological cycle, the Ulster cycle, the Finian cycle, and the King cycle. Let's run through them one by one. 1. The mythological cycle. Stories in the mythological cycle concern themselves primarily with the various races of gods and godlike people who successively invade and inhabit Ireland in the pre-Christian era. These are, in order, the Cessair, the Partholonians, the Numidians, the Firbolg, the Tuatha Dé Danann, and the Milesians. And of course, just like a phase in a modern cinematic universe, every storytelling cycle needs its big bad. In the case of the mythological cycle, that's Balor of the Evil Eye, a monster with a humongous fiery eye that can vaporize entire armies. Balor is the leader of the Fomorians, who originated from beneath the earth, and yeah, if this is all starting to sound familiar, it's because Tolkien read all of this stuff too. Think about it, Tuatha Dé Danann are...
Yeah, because he was a par excellence honorer of his ancestors, his being just that, the Irish ancestry. And we shouldn't be, in my opinion, so salty about uh, Christian Celtic people uh, honoring their ancestors exceptionally well.
Are the mystical elves who recognize that the age of men, the Milesians, is upon them, so they go to Valinor, the Undying Lands, which sounds an awful lot like Tir na Nog, the Land of Youth. Anyway, the survival of these myths hinges largely on two medieval manuscripts, the aforementioned Liber Gabella Erin and the metrical Dincentius, Lore of Places. Popular stories from the mythological cycle include the Children of Lear, which sees the titular Tuatha sea god, an inspiration for Shakespeare's King Lear, fathering 4 children who are turned into swans by his jealous second wife, and the Wooing of Etain, in which the titular princess falls in love with the god Medir of the Tuatha but then his angry ex transforms Etain into a bejeweled fly. Yeah, there's a whole lot of transforming into animals in this cycle and in Irish mythology in general. Speaking of animals, Etain is sometimes given the epithet Ecraid, meaning horse rider, suggesting a possible connection to the Gaulish Epona and the Welsh Rhiannon. 2. The Ulster Cycle. The Ulster Cycle, aka the Red Branch Cycle, concerns the warriors known as the Red Branch who defend Ulster during the reign of Conor MacNessa. The main stories of the cycle comprise the epic Tan Bo Cooley, which has been described as
Right, so uh, we're getting closer to modern times, but we need to be careful. Well, I mean, in this right here, we're seeing even just a general comfort from Celtic ancestry shifting or creating a distinction between the first commandment, worshiping of the one true God, and the 10th or the fifth commandment, honor your father and mother. Uh, they're humanizing the uh, gods, as it were. They are uh, seeking to, they're creating more legends, the acts of men, strong men, but men nonetheless.
the Irish Iliad. The Táin, as it's known for short, sees Queen Maeve and her husband King Ailill of Connacht wage war against Ulster, all for the sake of the prized stud Don Cooley, the Brown Bull of Cooley. The primary hero of this cycle is Cú Chulainn, the Hound of Cullen, also called the Hound of Ulster, who is sometimes compared to Achilles, but who is definitely more like the Irish Hulk. The myths of the Ulster cycle are preserved in 2 12th century texts, the Book of the Dun Cow and the Book of Leinster. 3. The Finian Cycle. The Finian Cycle chronicles the adventures of the hero Finn McCool and the Finians, also known as the Fianna, who are a band of warriors responsible for guarding the High King of Ireland. Within the Finian Cycle, we find the Macna Marta Finn, or Boyhood Deeds of Finn, a collection of stories chronicling the hero's rise from forced exile and fosterhood to his feasting on a supernatural fish, the salmon of knowledge, to him as a 10-year-old defeating a fire-breathing, literally otherworldly monster with a magical spear on Samhain, thus saving Tara, the seat of the High King, from certain destruction. But arguably the most famous story from the Finian cycle, the pursuit of Dermot and Grania, is set chronologically much later when Finn is an old man. In the story, Grania, Finn's betrothed, runs off with a young dashing warrior of the Fianna.
Right, so I'm going to get into this, but uh, again, we've shifted from legend, or shifted from myths, the working of the gods, to men, or legends, the workings of men. And again, this is very expected when you're also dealing with Christians writing these things down. So there's definitely a seeking from the Irish Christians and the Celtic Christians in general to uh, bring their people, uh, their the rest of the pagan people. So these uh, Christian men and women of Celtic descent or ancestry uh, are seeking to love their kin, their neighbors, uh, back from the weak gods or the gods that have strength to the one true God, the God who has all the strength.
Diarmid Ua Dubna, or Diarmid of the Loved Spot, foster son of the love god Angus. Shenanigans ensue, including Diarmid meeting his demise at the at the tusk of his stepbrother who had been turned into a magical boar. Note, the Finian cycle is also known as the Oceanic cycle after the cycle's alleged author, the aforementioned Oisin.
This is what I'd do if I had to lose 20 pounds.
I don't want to lose 20 pounds. But so we see quickly that we're creeping up on the modern day for sure.
If you want to drop this, start eating more of these.
How about new? Sorry, I was responding to a video that you can't hear. We are getting close to the end, but in quick progression, we are seeing that there is a definite. I don't, I am pro the Christian or Celtic Christians wanting to uh, honor their ancestry, to whom they would have very little in common belief-wise, but still seeking to uh, keep a record of what it is that they believed. And also, like how Augustine was able to do his City of God, where he's showing the parallel histories of sacred history and pagan history. He does or you can see that that similar tradition happens with the Celtic Christians, where they are showing an intermingling of the sacred history with the pagan history.
4. The King Cycle. Also known as the Cycle of Kings or the Historical Cycle, the King Cycle blurs the lines between history and myth more so than any of the earlier cycles. Geared toward providing examples of how to be a good ruler, the cycle features the likes of real historical figures such as the Irish king Brian Boru, born in 941 CE, as well as purely mythological ones, such as Labraid Longsec, the mariner who speaks, who, according to Irish legend, was an exiled High King of Ireland who lost the ability to speak after eating his father's heart. Yum. One of the most popular stories of the cycle is Bull Sweeney, the
Should be pointed out that this is, I would assume, a father-son situation. So patricide. So this is the idea that I mentioned before of the son, the word, being in enmity with the father, and so you're dealing with a story that would show something like this, where you break the fifth commandment of honor your father and mother. You break that, committing patricide, and you stop speaking. Put in a Christian way, the son, the word of God, cannot rebel against the father, or else he would lose his power, as it were. And uh, so this story of patricide leads to uh, muteness is a picture of that, of the idea, the Christian idea that there is no enmity within the Godhead. It would be, for if there was enmity with the Godhead, we would cease to exist. Because the only way we exist is by God continuing to speak us into existence. If there became enmity between God and his word, he would stop speaking, would go mute, and we would dissolve into nothingness.
Frenzy of Sweeney, or the Badness of Sweeney. The story tells of a king of the Dalriada, Sweeney Gilt, who, after fleeing a battle, journeys through Ireland's wild places in search of peace of mind. The Irish character might have helped inspire Merlin from Arthurian legend, but it's still up for debate. FYI, I wrote a series of essays about Sweeney and Merlin and Mirrodin and the origins of the Celtic wild man of the woods motif over at irishmyths.com. Another approach to categorizing Irish myths. While the four cycles approach to Irish myth categorization has become ubiquitous in the study of Irish mythology, it can be a bit confusing since the Irish gods, i.e. the Tuatha Dé Danann, and their descendants can and do appear across multiple cycles. The Morrigan, for example, after playing a significant role in the
Right, and this, you see this in modern day language or storytelling. There's an incorporation between the gods and myths and legends and the workings of man throughout all of these creative structures because bards are going to bard, storytellers are going to storytell, poets are going to poet.
Mythological cycle goes on to effectively haunt the hero Cuchulainn during the Ulster cycle and is a witness to his death. True, while some particular stories may veer more into legend or folktale or even history territory, myths naturally abound across all 4 cycles of Irish mythology, which is why it's so weird that the first cycle of Irish mythology is called the mythological cycle. And here's the thing. It hasn't always been like this. Prior to the adoption of the 4 cycles, chroniclers of Irish mythology organized stories into 2 main categories: prime scale, chief tales, and faux scale, minor tales.
And that is exactly what I'm dealing with. You are dealing with storytelling, and I like this divide where I was bringing up. You've got uh, bards just in their little tribes. I'd probably throw the minor tales into that, just guys telling stories to their families, versus a market day storyteller where the chief tales come. So you've got bedtime stories in the minor tale side, and then you've got tribal stories, myth stories of the tribal distinctions, market day stories, where you would find at the Raths.
According to Ellis, prime scale stories included battles, voyages, tragedies, adventures, military expeditions, courtships, elopements, concealments, destructions, sieges, feasts, slaughters, and cattle raids. There were a lot of cattle raids. Whereas the faux scale included pursuits, visions, exiles/banishments, and lake bursts. The lake burst, or tomhaid in Irish, is both a natural, make that supernatural phenomenon, as well as a genre of bardic story in which a lake or bay or other body of water just sort of bubbles up out of nowhere, often when someone is digging a grave. Granted, the most famous lake burst from Irish mythology, arguably, occurs at Loch Ness as a result of a giant magical horse, a gift from the aforementioned love god Angus, taking a pee. Which reminds me, Angus, son of the Data, also goes by the moniker Mac Og, young son, and has a likely cognate in the Welsh mythical figure Mabon ap Modron, as well as in the Gaulish god Mapanos, aka the Great Sun. But back to the lake eruptions. Turns out they're a pretty common story category across the Celtic world, or at least the Atlantic Celtic world, with examples appearing in medieval manuscripts in Wales, Cornwall, Brittany, and Normandy. And no, well,
And this is probably because there's plenty of earthquakes that then cause wells of water bubbling up from the earth and then creating lakes. They're not as simple as glaciers carving in. There could be as simple as more cataclysmic events, of which bards make good stories about.
while Normandy is not considered a bastion of Celtic culture in the same way that Ireland, Wales, Cornwall, and Brittany are, alongside Scotland and the Isle of Man, and occasionally Galicia and Asturias, they're considered the 6 or 8 modern Celtic nations, Normandy was, for much of its history, teeming with Gaulish tribes. So once again, we find another possible link connecting the mythologies of Gaulish-speaking Celts, Brittonic-speaking Celts, and Gaelic-speaking Celts. And once again, we catch a glimpse of a theoretical common Celtic mythology that would ultimately seed the creation of Irish mythology. If you enjoyed this video, please like and comment.
No pressure. All right, so just like he's wrapping up, I am also going to wrap up. If, as he was mentioning, if you liked some of this videoage, I pray that you will be so kind as to share with a Celtic pagan and let them critique me all day long. Uh, or if you have any comments or concerns or saying that I'm way off base, that is perfectly fine. But please, just as I sought to honor my father and mother and my ancestors' view of things, while at the same time seeking to put them in a Christian perspective, uh, I pray that if you are a pagan, please don't be too envious. Don't come at me with too much enmity. The desire for me is to uh, see where uh, the uh, diversity minus the enmity comes in. And I had mentioned at the beginning of the video, if I were to leave Christianity, it would be for paganism, not for another monotheistic or nihilistic framework such as atheism. because there's too much diversity, and there's certainly not nothing, as atheism would grab, and it's not a basic unity as Islam or one of the uh, mysticisms of the Eastern sands would try to lead us to believe. I'd be more inclined to the diversity than I would be for the uh, unity or nihilism. So that is where I'm at when it comes to all of that. Still a Christian, but uh, my appreciation for this gent from Irish Myth to break down how, uh, especially Christians, were seeking to make sense of the world around them, uh, and the Celtics and the Irish and the Gaelic Celts, the Welsh Celts, and all of the Celts who have similar stories dealing with different events or behaviors of nature and their common man, is a commonwealth desire that clearly even the Celtic Christians, of which I am one, were seeking to bring forth in their stories. So, till then, God bless you guys, and please, by all means, don't be a stranger. Be